Thanks, Catherine, and it's lovely to be here today. So I'm Christine Storer from Sturt University. My colleague Karl from Harper Adams will be joining me shortly. But behind us, as always, is a large team, including Soils for Life, who've assisted in preparing some of the case studies with this, and be some more details on that towards the end. So what were we doing? What was our project about? It was about regenerative agriculture. But the first thing that we needed to do was to first of all define what it is and how it's different to modern conventional agriculture, because there's quite a bit of a blur and people continually say to me, what is this, how are they different, I think I'm doing regenerative but I don't call myself regenerative, etc. And then from that we actually want to see what are the benefits and therefore how can you measure them, because if you don't even know what you're doing it's really hard to define these benefits. And we took the triple and bottom line approach, so the economic, environmental and social benefits, and we'll talk about some of our measures in a minute. And then we wanted to have a look at how people go about making the decision. Are you going to be regenerative or not? How do you trade off those different things? How do you go about doing it? So in terms of the research methods, because it was quite a new area, there was quite a lot of work to be done first of all on that definition. What is regenerative agriculture? We did an extensive literature review and surprise, surprise, there was quite a few different definitions. But from that we came up with what we thought was a theoretical framework that we could try and test. And we worked then with the Soils for Life team, who put together 6 case studies, thanks, of what were in regenerative agriculture, and we used in vivo analysis, which is a qualitative tool to pull out and extract what are those key themes. And then we followed up with in-depth interviews for regenerative agriculture farmers, for what we call modern conventional agriculture farmers. And once again, just to clarify those themes and to make sure that the framework that they would put together, the definitions we put together, worked. And once we had that, we've then run a survey and we're running some descriptive statistics. You'll hear later from our PhD student, Pradeep Rai, who'll explain some of the results of that survey. He's only got 4 minutes, so I'm going to tell you what the basis was and the items, because Karl is going to follow and give you some of the outcomes of the modelling. So we did a couple of different types of different assessments. Now, max, diff and conjoint are different ways to force people to give you their underlying trade-offs and decision points. Often in surveys in social sciences, we do a Likert scale, 1 to 5, 1 to 7, agree, disagree. What happens though if everything is all lined up as a 7 or all as a 5? You have to kind of force the choice. The conjoint gives people scenarios and they have to choose between the different scenarios, and in that way we're eliciting what are their preferences and what are the relative importance of the different things. The max diff is another way of doing that, but it even forces them even more so, because we want them to tell us, usually it's best, worst. We did the most important and the lesser important. Now sometimes people got a little bit cross with this. They're all important, yeah, but we want you to give us the most important one, because we want you to show what you're trading off. And that's important to understand that, because it led into the modelling work that we did and is evaluating it. So a couple of things first. Where did we get to with the definitions? Now, this is quite important because many people still that I talk to don't understand the differences between regenerative and modern conventional. They are all stewards of the land. The differences are relatively subtle. So if you say to them, we do cover crops, multi-species forage crops, yes, they do. Regenerative tend to use more cover crops, higher coverage for most of the year, living roots, and a greater number of species. So it's similar concept, but it's degrees of. Holistic grazing management, they all say they do it, but it's more intensively done by the regenerative agriculture people. They have sometimes their livestock on a piece of land for 1 day. Okay, so this is super intensive grazing systems. Trials and experimentation, all farmers do it. We find that there was a greater amount of experimentation with regenerative, and my background from that was because they are doing something quite new. They're trying to work out what to do. They are doing a lot more of that. That'll probably settle down perhaps in time, hard to say. And as a result of that, they're doing a lot of peer-to-peer learning. You can't just call up your local agronomist and say, I'm an RA farmer, what do I do? They don't know. You've got to learn from each other. Some things that were distinctly different is that obviously the modern conventional farmer uses synthetic chemicals and fertilisers. Regenerative agriculture will use them if they need to. They try to minimise, and some of them don't use any. And that's probably one of the really clear points of difference that people can see that is different. As I said, with that highly intensive holistic grazing system, they have very small paddocks, long rest periods. Most of the ones that we spoke to, in fact, had stopped cropping. Okay, and so these systems are working better if you're not cropping. Not that you have to, but that's what a lot of them were telling us. And the key thing that is really different, as I said, is just a holistic system. We don't have yes or no answers. We want what is better for the soil, the people, the environment as a whole. So how do we measure the different variables and what are the benefits? We looked at the economic benefits around, and I've got the full question there, but I'll just for time purposes, around profitability, around debt, around cash flow. The environmental was around biodiversity, soil health, and minimising the negative impact of things like weed, insect, vertebrates and pest diseases, pathogens. And the social was around your standard of living, making sure that you're aligned with best practice and sufficient work-life balance or leisure time. So they're the kind of the variables that we measured. And we basically came up with a model, and I've talked to you about the differences in what is regenerative, what is modern conventional. We said that it's going to impact the way that people think about their trade-offs in terms of environmental, economic and social, and we'll have different outcomes from this. Pradeep is going to tell you a bit more about the survey results in his 4 minutes. I'm going to hand over to Karl now, who's going to give you a little snapshot into where we're going with the modelling. It's just coming up, but there'll be more in the near future. Thanks, Karl.
So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Karl Behrendt, obviously. I'm from Harper Adams University, but I'm an adjunct with CSU, so that's the connection, just in case you're curious. Big green button. I've heard people say that plenty of times today. I should have learnt. So, what we wanted to do for this particular stage is develop a multi-criteria decision-making approach to analyse what farmers are doing and why they do what they do. 2 minutes. Wow. Thanks. Okay.
You're from overseas, I'll give you more time.
So 30 seconds or something? Yeah. Okay, I've just used that up anyway. Right. So we used a multi-criteria approach, which basically meant linking interviews, survey responses with biophysical modelling and also multi-criteria type approach. So what we're looking at is we developed a case study looking at a typical beef system in southeastern New South Wales, eastern Riverina, based on a self-replacing herd. So this is a very typical system, moderate input, moderate output. But it has the option of transitioning, now the important thing is the transitioning part, has the option of transitioning to a high input, high output type system, or to alternative regenerative agriculture-based systems. There is a subtle change in what's being produced from feeder steers down to basically weaner production, and you can see the differences there between what characterises the different systems. And a key part of the interview process was defining what the decision rules actually look like in terms of when do you move stock, when do you feed stock, and also when do you fertilise, when don't you fertilise, and your supplementary feeding strategies and destocking strategies as well. And then we extracted from that modelling a process-based modelling, different criteria to put against those criteria that were used and weighted in the surveys. So interestingly, these are our preliminary multi-criteria decision analysis outcomes, and what this chart is showing is the overall benefits. So it's the aggregated benefit for each potential option. Now the four arrows, the four that are, yep, that'll be fine, thank you. The four arrows indicate systems that are all running at the same stocking rate. And in the brackets you can see the subtle differences in the stocking rates. Now the differences are there because of the time young animals spend on the farm predominantly, as well as reproductive rates and a few other things. But when we look at this, the typical modern conventional agricultural farmer, when we apply the weightings we get from overall the survey, we had 102 survey respondents, and there's only subtle differences between RA or self-identified RA farmers and self-identified model conventional agricultural farmers. There's very subtle differences in what their preferences are, and we apply those preference weights against those metrics that are listed in the legend. And you can see there the typical MCA farm is actually quite balanced. But I'll draw your attention now to the two RA farms which don't perform very well at the highest stocking rate. But if they reduce their stocking rates, the overall benefits from adopting those systems actually improve substantially, nearly to the point that they're both higher than the typical MCA producer in terms of providing the overall benefit of everything they're actually looking for in terms of environmental outcomes, social outcomes, and economic outcomes, because it's not just one thing. Now, the standout one there is the high input, high output modern conventional agricultural farmer at a lower stocking rate. It's, you know, it demonstrates you invest in soil fertility, you invest in lime, you invest in pasture sowing, and you run a low stocking rate, it can look really, really good, plus give you an economic return. But if you pursue higher economic returns, you move to the high input-output MCA, but with a higher stocking rate, and you trade off a lot of environmental outcomes. Interestingly, it's comparable between that and the RA farmer with the lower stocking rate. But the RA farmer obviously has much lower economic return than the MCA farmer, which is what we're seeing in the field. So, in conclusion, we think there's very subtle differences between RA and MCA, although there still seems to be a fair bit of confusion out there. This system that we've developed can actually assess quite complex interactions over long term and give a clear picture of what trade-offs people are making to identify better systems for themselves. If you invest obviously in fertiliser and all those things, you can make a system look quite attractive, and you can increase soil organic matter, which is our proxy for soil health. I'll just say that on. I know there's a lot of experts in the room who would argue about that. But interestingly, from the simulation modelling that we've done, the RA systems, especially intensive, higher residual systems, are showing indications that they're environmentally more stable in their outcomes, although it comes with an economic trade-off. And this economic trade-off is largely because of the costs of subdivision. The systems that we modelled were 25 paddock systems under modern conventional agriculture versus 64 and 121 paddock systems under the RA systems. So there's quite a substantial capital cost coming along with that people trade off. So we do need to do further work around calibration, sensitivity analysis, amongst other things, and also take into account how farmers' preferences interact with each other, because at the moment we're being fairly linear about that. And if anything, this work's really highlighted the importance of needing to do qualitative and quantitative methods in trying to understand a new research area. Just doing one or the other would not have given us the insight we needed. Thank you very much.